Record button as well. Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Schulak. I'm here today on behalf of Family Focus Resource Center. We are a resource center that helps families with children that have a disability. Regardless of the disability, we are here to help. We do these wonderful workshops. We have several support groups. And sorry, I'm just trying to minimize my screen and it's not letting me. And lots of great other things like our resource fair, which hopefully you've all been to. We may have another one coming up in October, so please make sure you've subscribed to our newsletter. I will be putting that in the chat on how to make sure that you're receiving our newsletter on a monthly basis. Sorry. Today you are here for a presentation called Police Interactions Amongst Neurodiverse Individuals. This is a very important topic for lots of us. I know Victoria and I from Family Focus both have adult and teen sons who are on the spectrum. So this especially hits home for us as well. So we're glad that you're here. I'm going to introduce our two presenters, Thomas Iland, who is a certified human potential coach. He is a Toastmasters International accredited speaker. He is an author. You will find he's done a great show with PBS NewsHour that you can find in the chat right now. So that is there for you. And we will be sending you all the slides as well as the links to his PBS show and everything that he's presenting here today with the link to the YouTube channel recording. You will be receiving that within a week. He is also here today with his fiance, Rosetta Walker, who is also a Toastmasters International speaker. So they're going to both be presenting today on this great topic. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Thomas because he's got a lot to cover, and I want to make sure we cover everything today on this wonderful workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana, for having us here today. It's really a pleasure to be back with the Family Focus Empowerment Center. I don't know if some of you recall our presentation on romance and relationships last year, and we were able to share some of our personal story, but we're going to be discussing a little more serious topic today. But our relationship continues to bloom professionally and personally. We're getting married on September 21st, and we really like to share our stories and see what we can create together and build more community to serve this center and beyond. And it's hard to believe that it's been 6 years and change since we last met, or since we first met, rather. But it was love at first sight, and we are really interested in what we can do together and alert and ready, as we like to call this program that we'll be discussing today, is something that we want to bring to the neurodiverse community so that when it comes to interacting with police officers, they can get home alive at the end of the day and be alert as to what's happening in the world when it comes to police and be ready if or when they meet the police. And we have about 13 people in the room, or at least 13 screens here today. We want to encourage your participation because you get out of what you put into things. And if you have a question, we will have opportunities for questions during the course of the presentation, also at the very end of the presentation, time permitting. And you can also drop questions you may have in the chat, and we can address those as they come through. But we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Now, some of the content in this presentation might make people uncomfortable on the physical, mental, or emotional front, because when interacting with the police, and I've had my fair share of encounters myself, none to the point of arrest and knock on my wood coffee table here. I'd like to keep it that way, but basically, sometimes it can be very scary interacting with the police, and some of you may have had some experiences already, and this may bring about some unpleasant memories or feelings or sensations. So I want to warn you all that that might be the case, or if you do feel that way, you do what you need to do to bring yourself back into equilibrium, and let's be mindful of that particular instance. But I also want to point out that Rosetta and I, we are not attorneys, we are not legal professionals, and this presentation that we're going to be giving today is for informational purposes only. And it's not intended to be legal advice or part of another course of legal action. And it's best that you consult rather with your own attorney or legal professional or law enforcement professionals in your area, because as we talk about today, there's going to be a lot of information, and information can be different in different parts of this city, this state, this country, and in other countries too.
Yeah, that's true because depending on where we at, we may have to do this presentation different because different states do have different laws. And even in a county, you can go into another county and find out they may have different rules and regulations. So keep that in mind.
Mhm. For example, Los Angeles Police Department and Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, two completely different departments. They serve the same or similar areas, but may have different protocols and procedures. But we'll be talking about some of those gray areas and what to be mindful of over the course of this presentation. But as a reminder, we are not legal professionals, so do not take any of this as legal advice or anything along those lines. And you heard a little bit about my background, some of my credentials, and I also have a Guinness World Record that I have set and broke as the world's oldest person with autism to finish a full Ironman triathlon. That's 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of biking, and 26.2 miles of running, all in under 17 hours. And during the pandemic, I put on the COVID-19 and wanted to work that off, so I decided to make that happen. But I also blossomed in my coaching business. When I'm not doing presentations like this, I coach people on the autism spectrum to know themselves, love themselves, and be themselves. And I call it come to life coaching because it's my philosophy that life doesn't come to you, it's up to you to come to life. And many of our children, students, clients might be sitting back waiting for something to happen, and I'm encouraging them to get out there and make it happen for themselves. The problem is sometimes they might do something that is deemed unusual or suspicious. And since we live in a see something, say something society, the police might get called in. That's why we're here today. And I've been working with Los Angeles Police Department's mental evaluation unit for the better part of 20 years, presenting through the Autism Society of Los Angeles to the officers about what they need to know when it comes to interacting with the neurodiverse population, specifically Autism Society. But I assure them that what they learn in that class can apply to other diagnoses as well. And my work was recently featured in an episode of PBS NewsHour. I dropped the link into the chat. It'll also be made available after. In the interest of time and potential technical difficulties, we will not be watching that episode. You can watch it on your own time, but it really does address the importance of why police need more training on autism. And yes, there are many programs out there that are training police. And there's also things that we need to be teaching our children, our students, our clients, so that they can help as well. So it's a two-way street, if you will, where both parties contribute and need to know what to expect from the other. And what we'll be discussing today, we'll be going over steps being taken to train police about neurodiverse individuals. There are many programs made available in this state and this country. There is also what neurodiverse individuals need to know when meeting the police. Some of your children may have already met an officer. Maybe they haven't. There may be things they've seen on TV and movies or in the media. How do those interactions look? And would you want them doing what happened in that movie in real life? But what's unique about this presentation, we're going to be discussing interactions involving people of color, as well as ICE, or Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And Rosetta is going to be focusing on that particular part of the presentation. So you're going to get the best of both worlds, if you will, as we move forward with this presentation. Starting with training the police. And for my part, and in these formats here, we're going to be talking a little bit about the good things that are happening in the community and the not so good. if anybody's ever played the game Fortunately or Unfortunately, or maybe I've got good news, I've got bad news, or here's the rock, here's the hard place. So it's a very abstract and complex environment that we're going into as we look at what the police need to know. And fortunately, many communities do take training when it comes to police on neurodiverse individuals and how to interact with these populations seriously because these are members of the community. They want to know how to best serve them and how to de-escalate situations if need be or when they happen. Unfortunately, there's inconsistencies. There are programs all around the city, the state, the country, but they're not really communicating or collaborating with one another or not coming to a universal agreement about how it should be. So it's like a bunch of people reinventing the wheel in their own ways, or what works in this community may not work at all in that community. So as we travel, go to different parts of the world or the country, maybe on vacation or something, and what you know about police in your hometown could be totally different in the place you're vacationing or traveling to. And that's often blindsiding a lot of people, particularly neurodiverse individuals who tend to think it's this way, stick to that, or they aren't taught a word or procedure in another part. And then it's like, what now? And when you think about the tools in their toolbox, fight or flight, I think no matter where you travel, you cannot assault an officer and you cannot evade police. Those are crimes, and yet that's all they've got. So that is being trained or taught in many trainings throughout the country. However, all these programs are not connected. And it would be nice to have a universal standard. And I know like crisis intervention teams or CIT, some of them have a federal curriculum or standards or protocols that they follow. Then you get to the state level. Do they adhere to that or not? So there's a lot of mystery. I hate to say it, but there's still a lot of gray areas. And if you have anything you want to say, you may chime in as well.
Yeah, just to give an example, I remember when I was in Rome, and when you take pictures there, we have different monuments around in the United States that you can lean on them, you can touch them, and in some places you can even climb on them. Well, if you go to another country such as Rome and you climb on it or stand on it, you can literally get arrested. So that's what we're talking about. And that's just an example of different things you can do one place that you can't do in another place. So we're going to talk about what happens if you should be in a situation where you could possibly get arrested. And we're going to walk you through that process a little later on in this program.
Continuing with training the police, fortunately, a lot of communities are applying new technologies and modern approaches in their training. Some of them are using virtual reality as a way to practice or train themselves, find out what they need to know when interacting with individuals. And depending on the neurodiverse individuals in your life, virtual reality might be good for them if they're okay sensitivity wise with having that equipment on them. Unfortunately, some communities have had funding cut or never had any funding at all to better their trainings. So some of their material might be outdated, or they're not taking into account the ever-changing times or even changes in laws. As new laws come into play or as certain initiatives, budgets get cut or taken out of the equation, what does that do to the frequency or the quality of the trainings? So that's another inherent problem or difficulties with applying the training that police are having and experiencing both here in Los Angeles County and around the state and the country. So funding, whether or not they have the best technology, the most current information, it's another flaw, if you will, or risk when it comes to training the police. And as we move into the control factor, because the police are there to reestablish order, maintain control, and once they get it, they may have difficulty letting go. Whereas a lot of the trains, particularly mine with LAPD, the one that I have customized to LAPD and got featured on PBS, it's encouraging empathy amongst the police because we bring about the human element. Police officers are people too. And sometimes they don't always get it right. We were in Phoenix recently. We heard from a police officer who told us a story about how she had to shoot somebody dead.
Yes.
And it still haunts her to this day. So we have to understand that these police, while we sometimes may expect them to be experts on everything, they are human too. And some of them are unwilling or unable to loosen their grip a bit, much like the guy on the right here. Some police are so stuck in their ways or don't want to lose their job or are not going to give anyone an inch, not even a neurodiverse individual. And that can lead to poor outcomes too. Anything you want to say on that?
I could say something there, but I guess
Or
I'll wait for later.
save it for later.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
save it for later.
So, so any questions on police training before we get into what neurodiverse individuals need to know or should know? Not seeing anything in the chat at the moment. Could also take the opportunity to unmute if you'd like. Going once, twice. We'll go on to the next section. We'll have time, or we should have time at the end if you think of something that you want to bring up later on. But now we'll get into what neurodiverse individuals need to know. As I mentioned earlier, the fight or flight instinct, that's our go-to. And we as adults or those who know what to do when it comes to meeting the police, we suppress those instincts and we remain calm. We listen to what the police are saying. We do what they say. If we're not sure, we might ask a question, well, what do you mean by that? For neurodiverse individuals, that might be difficult. Hearing the word and attempting to execute the command or do what the police say. And there are curriculums and materials that show neurodiverse individuals how to interact with the police. In New England, for example, in Connecticut and New York, they have a driver's ed program which teaches neurodiverse students how to drive, but also shows them, and they actually act out, being pulled over by the police. So they have officers do a mock pullover, ask for the license, ask for the registration. And it's also an opportunity for neurodiverse individuals to disclose what they have as far as diagnosis goes. And we'll talk about that in a moment on the next slide here. But as mentioned earlier before, unfortunately, protocols and procedures may vary from place to place. The uniforms they wear, what kind of questions they ask, procedures if they suspect something's up. So again, this is something that we need to be mindful of as we go from place to place. It's not always the same thing everywhere. As we move to the next slide, disclosing your diagnosis, and police officers tell us the more information they have, the better they can do their job. So for your neurodiverse individuals in your life, do they know about their diagnosis? If not, why not? And how could they say how it affects them and what kind of help they need? So all that information needs to be made available to the police if and when possible. The problem is if you have that information, say, written on a card in your wallet, when a police officer who wants to see your hands sees a neurodiverse individual going like this, the police are going to think that a weapon is involved. That is their training, that is their instinct, and they feel they need to protect their own lives, and they will. So we need to show our neurodiverse individuals to only go for an item, an ID, a self-disclosure card when they're asked or ask permission. May I show you my card? Or have some way to produce information safely if and when possible.
Yeah. And when saying safety, can I show you my card? Wait for the answer. Don't say, can I show you my card and reach for it as you're talking simultaneously, because that also can lead to a really fatal situation that we want to avoid that.
And this happened to me actually firsthand. I was driving one year, I got pulled over, and I thought that officer wants to see my ID and started to reach for it as they're approaching the vehicle. Thankfully, that officer said, "Sir, please keep your hands on the steering wheel where I could see them." And then I got permission to go for the ID. But we can't read people's minds. Unfortunately, neurodiverse individuals might think police officers can read their mind. It's called theory of mind, or TOM, Tom for short. Like, that officer knows I'm going for my ID. No, they don't. Their first thought is weapon. I gotta do what I gotta do to stay alive. So, hands where they can be seen. Ask permission before going for the ID. And the more information the officer has, the better they can do their job. Now, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead here as far as police mentality, but I have a disclosure card in my wallet. I've gotten many responses to it after being pulled over. I showed it to one officer here in Santa Clarita. He said, I don't need to see that. I got pulled over by Nebraska Highway Patrol a few years back. I showed it to her, this female officer, and she's like, oh, started reading it. I got off with a warning that day, and she said, thank you for this information. It was very helpful. So even if the neurodiverse individual discloses safely, the officer may or may not welcome it. This is another thing to be mindful of.
And if that should happen, that is not, you don't get a chance to say what you feel you need to say or show your card immediately you want to do it right then, it's still very important that you remain calm, because getting excited, getting irritated, you're going to be anxious and even nervous, but it's very important to try to remain calm as possible.
And anybody here have a neurodiverse individual who loves to follow the rules and maybe enforces those rules on other people? Maybe come off as a smart aleck? One example I could see myself maybe doing is, there was a new law recently that was passed that an officer, at least here in California, from what I understand, cannot ask you, do you know why I pulled you over? It's no longer legal for them to be asking that question. But if I were to say to an officer, I'm pretty sure it's illegal for you to ask that question, that officer is going to think, or could think, I'm not respecting their authority. It's like, step out of the car, please, sir. You want to be a smart aleck? Let's see where that goes. So when the police tell you to do something, whether you think it's right or not, you may have to do it and cooperate and not argue. I know that sounds harsh, but this is the reality. I'm going to go on to this slide here, and then Rosetta's going to take over, because usually, and the objective is for everybody to get home safe at the end of the day. And when instructions are followed, when our individuals do what the police say, for the most part, that interaction will go well. And in my case, I've gotten off with a warning when I may have gotten a ticket or a citation. But in some cases, maybe if the officer is involved, or depending on the officer involved, I should say, or other circumstances that initiate certain protocols amongst the police, there may have to be handcuffs put on a neurodiverse individual. Not necessarily that they're under arrest, but to be detained. And some say that handcuffs are also used as a way to calm somebody down. I'm not so sure about that. It seems very uncomfortable and even triggering or traumatic to have your hands in that position. I have had handcuffs put on me as part of a simulation or a scenario, not actual arrest, but it's not comfortable. And I was able to remain calm. I was in a simulated scenario environment. But when our neurodiverse individuals are out there in the field and they've had that feeling for the first time, who knows how they may react, and probably not in a good way. And I see something coming through on the chat here. I want to address that before I turn the floor over to Rosetta. Victoria says there's a bill in the California legislature right now to expand the blue envelope program from the previous slide nationwide. There was a similar bill last year, but it failed to become law. Such a shame. Like, we're doing the right things. We want the police to know about our population, but apparently the legislators or the powers that be are like, nope, you're on your own. Fend for yourselves. It's not really cool or fair, is it? And speaking of not cool or fair, we're now going to transition into, once I get my slide changed here. First, any questions about what neurodiverse individuals need to know before we go into people of color and ICE? Going once. Going twice. All right, we'll now go over to Rosetta for people of color and ICE.
As we know, people of color have a higher chance of getting stopped by the police, even arrested or even questioned. A lot of times they are said to fit the description of someone when with t-shirt, blue jeans, and a dark skin complexion. That can fit a whole lot of people. So many times they have mistaken identity and they could be innocent. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, just be aware 9 out of 10, the police officer may think you are guilty. So even though it's a mistaken identity, they're going to go through the whole process of putting the handcuffs on you. They may tell you why you're being arrested, but that police officer, is not their job to be the jury and the judge. So they can't at that moment say, okay, we don't think you did it, we're going to let you go. Sometimes that can happen. That they can realize, hey, we made a mistake. You're not the person we thought that you were, and let the person go. Other times it doesn't happen. Can you imagine being accused of something that you know you did not do? Whether it's a robbery, whether it's a murder, or whatever it could be. Can you imagine how that feels to be accused of something that you know you did not do? Well, unfortunately, that's the case for people, sometimes brown or people of color, and you can't do anything about it other than cooperate. Because yelling, screaming, or even fighting back can cost you your life. Because there's two things going on. It's a person being accused of something that they did or did not do, and you have an officer doing their duty. The officer doesn't know which way to go, and they are trained to react with more aggression when it comes to people of color because they assume it can become violent. They assume that person might be carrying a weapon. So what's going to happen? If you fight, the officer is going to have to defend themselves. And this is the reason why you see that first picture, I can't breathe. George Floyd was not the first person life to be taken by the police. And I can't breathe. This has been happening for years. We can go all the way back to the 60s and 1920s if you want to go back that far. Undocumented, of course. So the reason why we're talking about this is because now we have another element that's been added in the mix, and that's ICE. If you are ever in a situation that a person may think, oh, you're illegal, you don't belong here, do not run. Because if you run, they're going to chase you. And if you fight, you can end up getting shot, or you can still end up in a situation where you don't get a chance to even prove that you are a citizen. So if you find yourself in that situation, this is what I want you all to do. Remain calm. Have someone's number in your mind. I know we have cell phones and we keep everybody's numbers in our cell phone. That's not going to work if you get arrested. You need to know the person you want to contact. You get a phone call, you have a right to make that phone call. But if you don't know the number, you can't call mom, you can't call dad, your aunt, your caregiver. So just keep in mind, have at least 2 or maybe 3 people, numbers that you can remember, that you know their number, that you can contact if anything should happen, that you get in trouble with law enforcement. And let's say it's a situation where you did do what you're accused of being doing. Remain calm. That's always going to be the answer. Because if you remain calm, you can get through this and find out it's not as bad as you thought it was.
And I'll also note that a lot of times neurodiverse individuals do not know their rights and will, when questioned, say things that could land them in more trouble than if they had just stayed quiet. Granted, I believe it's law. You have to provide your name and date of birth to an officer, no exceptions. But then say, I need a lawyer. I need to speak to an attorney. That should stop the questioning. Because once that word attorney, lawyer is brought into the mix, that's going to increase the likelihood of you at least getting help. And you do not have to talk to the police outside of name and birth date once you say, I need a lawyer. So get legal representation and as part of the Miranda warning, and mind you, they do not have to say the full Miranda warning if or when they arrest you, but you have the right to an attorney now and during future questioning. And if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you free of charge, like a public defender.
Yeah.
But a lot of times our neurodiverse individuals do not know their rights or how to implement them or get them into action, and that lands them in more trouble.
Yeah. And we have good officers out there. You have officers that are putting their life on the line every single day to keep us all safe. Then unfortunately, as Tom said earlier, you might have an officer that got other things in mind and really don't have respect for a person unless they look the way they want them to look. So that's the reason why we are teaching this class, is that you are aware, and to have the best outcome of anything, it's always best to cooperate. Because if you go ahead and cooperate, you have a chance of hopefully clearing up that misunderstanding, or neither person turns up dead, because that happens so many times. Fatality. We're really getting tired of that.
Yes.
That someone end up dead, whether it's the officer or it's the person.
And a
It's
lot
sad.
and a lot of times there's often misunderstandings, particularly on an administrative front. I heard in the media the other day a gentleman, through an administrative error, his identity was mistaken. He was taken from this country to a prison in El Salvador, and now they're having to clear the air on that and somehow bring him back if they do so in a timely manner. So even if things are not going well, still do your best to remain calm, because there's a good chance, if or when you are doing what is said within your rights, that the confusion can get cleared up, versus if you haven't technically done anything wrong, but you do something illegal in the aftermath, that's going to get you in trouble. Because, like I said earlier, the police are not perfect. Mistakes are made. There's miscommunication. People are not on the same page about who did what, when, where, why. So the more we can show a good example, show our neurodiverse individuals, you're doing great, remain calm,
Mhm.
even if it doesn't feel like this is going to end anytime soon. Patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue.
Yeah, and sometimes in a situation where the police get involved, things can move real, real quick.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like things are just spinning and moving
Mhm.
fast. And that's the reason why I'm saying this to you, because if you feel that feeling, you become a little overwhelmed, just catch yourself, calm down, and stay relaxed. Tell me about the story of the young man that was at the movie theater.
Yes, there was a gentleman with Down syndrome in a movie theater. He went to see a movie with a caregiver, and they were a few minutes late to the movie. And after the movie ended, this young man wanted to go back into the theater and see the 5 or so minutes that he missed. Unfortunately, somebody in the theater saw the young man go in without a second ticket and reported him to management. That young man didn't pay to see the movie the second time. So the manager wanted this young man out of the theater, and this young man would not get up. So security were called. They were off-duty police officers. They told this young man to get out of the theater. He wouldn't budge. They proceed to grab him, get him out of his seat, drag him into the movie theater lobby. The caregiver, meanwhile, says, his mother's on his way. Please remain calm. This will all be over soon. But it was then that a security guard and this young man tripped, fell on the floor, and the young man broke his neck and died on the floor of the lobby over a movie ticket. So both parties that day, the security team, mind you, they had been trained on neurodiverse individuals, but they didn't really recall a lot of their training because it wasn't empathy based. And also, this young man, had he known that these officers are people, they're not here to hurt them, and he should probably do what they say or some other alternative. But that's an example of when both parties do not know what to expect from the other, or not recalling what to do in the circumstance, the outcome can be fatal.
Right. And that's what we're talking about, how things can escalate so quickly. Something that doesn't need to be taken that far can be taken out of hand. So we're hoping that you're getting something out of this training or the class that we're teaching there. And if you have questions, We are open to answering them and discussing if you want to talk to about things further.
Questions about people of color, ICE? We're starting to come to the tail end of this presentation, so we'll be able to address other questions, I believe, without being recorded. So we will have that option available momentarily as well. But so to summarize what we've gone over what police trainings are happening and some of the fortunately, unfortunately bits about officers being trained on neurodiverse individuals. We also went over what neurodiverse individuals need to know when meeting the police, as difficult a struggle as it may be, and also about people of color and immigrations and customs enforcement. Because how many times more likely is someone with a person of color more likely to be involved in a police encounter?
Black individuals being over 2.5 times more likely to experience than whites.
And we really wanted to bring that up because there's a lot of people of color here in California and surrounding communities, and a lot of times they get overlooked or are underserved. So we wanted to make sure that that got brought up today, and I hope that was useful information. And we look forward to continued conversations about how to best
Mhm.
serve this population.
Yeah. Don't run, cooperate, and whatever you do, do not reach for any type of identification. Don't reach for anything because we've known too many situations where a person will end up in a bad situation. Well,
Mhm.
I hate to say it again, but you do not want to end up shot because the police
No.
will assume that their life is in danger and they're going to respond
Yeah.
accordingly.
Yeah. Sometimes police officers will use tasers first. Never been tased either. Once again, knock on wood, I'd like to keep it that way here. It is not pleasant to be tased.
Yeah.
So,
And when I was a little girl, my neighbor, my next door neighbor was a police officer. And he was a really good police officer. And I can remember one day, I think I was about 10, 11 years old. And I didn't see his police car there anymore. And his wife was telling my mom that he got killed in the line of duty. And I never forgot that story because I was like, wow, this is a good guy. So I know there are good police officers out there. So I'm just sharing that story. They're human too, just like we are. And we have to find a way that it works for both people on both sides, that the officers are safe and that you are safe, and that we get through what we need to go through, and that everyone is able to respond in an alert way. Now, if we were together in person, because we're on Zoom, there's different activities we can do together, but we're unable to do these activities because of Zoom. So we won't be able to do the activities, in-person activities.
but we are available for in-person activities or virtual presentations like this on this topic, as well as the topics you see here. And I recently wrote another book in addition to Come to Life called My Glass is Full: Stories of Putting Mental Health First. And we also have a book coming out together. They said we couldn't, so we did. Making relationships work when the odds are against you. And this is part of our this training or this class, this session that you went to today is part of our Alert and Ready program to discuss interactions with police officers and neurodiverse individuals. So we look forward to hearing from you as to what you would like to do with us in the future. Here is our contact information. At this time, we can take any last questions, comments, stories, recorded or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom and Rosetta. That was amazing. That was so informative and so many great tips that are on these slides. I'm going ahead and going to stop the recording now.